Hey, welcome back, people, to Mark My Words interviews with remarkable people. And I have Adam sitting here with Workrise. How you doing today, Adam?
Hey, great, Mark. Thanks for the time.
Oh yeah, it's and what people don't know, this is not our first attempt to record this conversation. We had some technical issues last time, so fingers crossed this one goes through. Adam, before we get to everything that we're going to talk about, because we're going to have some fun with this, real quick, Workrise. Maybe some people don't know who Workrise is at a high level. Who is Workrise?
Great question. So Workrise was formerly known as RigUp.
Yep.
We started off as a bidding platform. The goal there was to streamline our clients' abilities, or upstream E&Ps at the time, sort of core clients' ability to go to market and drive competitive pricing within the supplier base. That grew into us becoming a large contingent workforce provider. And as it stands today, we're the largest in the lower 48, in the upstream space, as well as in the midstream inspection and construction management space. In addition to that, we have continued to take our original startup DNA of becoming a bidding platform, and we've enabled clients with our source to pay solution. And this enables clients to not only have bidding, but have contract management, safety compliance being tracked on platform, as well as the thing that has impacted our clients the most, which is enable them to have us manage their unmanaged spend. An immense amount of our clients have categories of spend that are not being bid. There aren't structured rates associated with them, and they just cost a lot of money to manage a small amount of spend. We believe that that's part of our client spend needs to be managed. And that's like one of the last frontiers in areas where we can find the extra 5 to 10% savings on the service costs just by gaining efficiency, not only in giving time back, but also in enabling them with tools to drive pricing power.
Yeah. And let me just tell you from experience, so somebody runs a small company that recently changed accounting firms, the stuff that you don't manage, you unmanaged spend that I thought was pennies, after a while, it adds up to a significant amount, but because it's not on your radar, you don't know. So if you're listening to this and you have an interest in some cost saving stuff, reach out to Adam, reach out to Workrise. They do a lot more than that, but they absolutely can help you with that. So real quick, we're going to jump in the predictions, and the audience that listens knows that I do my predictions every year in November for the following year. I don't always get it right. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But y'all had some really good, some really good ones y'all put out. Now remember, people, we're recording this in February of 2025. These predictions came out last year, right? So some of the stuff may be kind of funny because Adam and his team may have missed it or they may have nailed it. But just remember, we're not doing this after we had the facts. The facts weren't there, before they did this. But my favorite one, which I think is exactly right on, is the industry's cost crunch will continue and intensify. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out. Also, great context that we're not doing this after the fact,
All
right?
right.
Obviously, so much is informed by these earnings reports from the public E&Ps, but look, there's not much help on commodity prices today. We know that, right? And so consolidation was largely driven by the need to save money and to get more dollars back on invested capital. But yeah, that's going to be the focus of the industry. That's really the only lever that we can pull to bring dollars back into our space. We know ideally the public E&Ps would have some margin expansion. A margin expansion with PE expansion as well for their stock prices to go up. But part of that is going to be maintaining high levels of profitability. We all know they also went to a high payout margin to their shareholders as well.
Right.
So those dollars they retain are going back to the shareholders, and hopefully that's driving additional multiple expansion in the stock price.
Yeah, they're definitely driving some additional shareholder value. The other thing, though, is I'm really proud of my industry, especially the upstream side, and the capital discipline they've been showing for the last couple of years. Because before that, no matter what anybody says, there was not a lot of capital discipline, right? It was all growth money, right? Grow, no matter what. And at some point, it's like almost like a Ponzi scheme. You just
Yep.
can't keep continuing to grow. At some point, you have to be profitable. Unfortunately, part of this cost cutting is there's been some right sizing of the workforce. And I think that's going to probably continue for the rest of this year. And I hate to see people lose their jobs, but it's the nature of where we are right now. But I think y'all absolutely, not only did y'all nail that, I think this is going to be kind of a new financial mantra in the industry, at least here and in Europe for a little while, which I think is actually ultimately good for the industry. If
Yeah.
we can run efficient operations, it allows us to keep our workforce healthy. It allows shareholders to be happy with their investments. It allows capital to actually do a little bit more work that needs to be done. But man, y'all grabbed that one. Y'all got that one right, and I think it's continuing. Um,
Well, do you mind if I add some
yeah, go
context?
ahead.
All right. What's interesting, and to be fair, this feels like a pretty easy prediction, right? So anyone out there watching this, it may seem like, hey, Workrise, like, come on, obviously, right? Because this is like they were all of our clients were talking about this last year, and it was in so many of their earnings calls. Um, but it's imperative for us to understand, like, this is also aligned with Chris Wright and the Department of Energy. Like, he first week in office last week, he had multiple interviews. One of those was, how do we drill, baby, drill with commodity prices maybe not justifying that? And I would argue that's a question that's out there, and it's a discussion point for many American households. We believe, and I think many of the clients know, that we have to reduce the cost of the barrel. And I know that's one of the things that the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, outlined last week, was like, hey, if we can help them reduce the cost to permit, the regulatory burden upfront, give them more certainty around permitting and the ability to go build their projects, whether it's pipeline transmission and or more certainty around their ability to get permits, reducing the cost associated with that, then they're doing their part to enable production in our country. That ideally translates into lower price per barrel and lower price per gallon at the gas pump, because we know inflation's an issue. And as the energy industry, we're committed to supporting our clients to reduce that overall cost.
Yeah. And it affects just more than the price of the pump. Ultimately, it affects almost the price of everything. I wish you could do something about the price of eggs, but we're not that magical yet.
That's
We
right.
can't regenerate chickens yet.
No.
But you're 100% right. And once again, we're also in this interesting geopolitical world. There's a lot of oil or a lot of hydrocarbons, I should say, that are not hitting the normal markets globally because of sanctions. And it's going to be interesting to see if and or when that those hydrocarbons ever hit the market. Other countries don't have the same level of care that we have. And so we have costs that other countries just don't have because we care about the environment, we care about our people. And boy, you're 100% right, man. If we could remove that uncertainty, so not only is the permitting process a cost, but the uncertainty is also a cost. You mitigate that risk if you run an E&P company whether am I going to get a permit this month or this year, right? So fingers crossed that our new administration clears up a lot of that stuff. I am a little bit concerned, though, that not now, because you can't really drill, baby, drill, right? It takes a little while to do that. I am a little bit of concern that our new administration will clean up a lot of the hurdles, a lot of the constraints, which will then lower costs. And if the timing's just right, and say Russia oil hits the market again at that same time, we might be in the opposite place where we have a low crude price environment.
Yeah.
And then the bad thing about that is the public will love it because it'll get extremely inexpensive to fill up your vehicle. The cost of groceries and everything else will get cheaper, but our industry won't be in a good place. So it's a good time to be where we are. I think regardless, I think our industry is going to benefit from this, and hopefully the public will as well.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. The next thing is consolidation trend will continue, but here's the interesting part. But the shape of it will change. What is that about?
Yeah, great question. So I think at the end of the day, we have less companies in the space. And that was driven by the need to obviously drive down that cost of the barrel to produce. It was also driven by like tier 1, tier 2 acreage positions and the need to have higher recovery rates. All of these things feed into return on invested capital. We know that's an important metric for our clients in the space, but that drove consolidation. So at the end of the day, there are way less targets. That's just the natural conclusion of so many companies coming together, and it's just going to reduce the amount of deals that can be done. I still think the dollar value of the overall deals, because the size of the companies that are left are large, could be equivalent year over year. I also believe that non-core acres positions, which we've, to be fair, already seen some deals start to hit the tape that they're getting done, that they're starting to spin off non-core assets from consolidated entities. And so an example would be post the Marathon Conoco combination, they're starting to spin off some non-core assets. I would expect this to accelerate throughout the year, where they identify these acreage positions that just are considered non-core. And how we define that is that they're going to have a drilling plan. They're going to have a place where they plan on putting most of their resources. And the reason why they would do that is because that's where they've got their infrastructure built out and they've got a competitive advantage. Those non-core asset spinoffs, what I'm excited about, will bring in a new breed of startups in our space.
So we got to be careful we don't geek out here, because I can spend 2 hours talking about this, because I'm excited as well.
Sorry.
So number one, I think it's going to be a new level of M&A activity with the spinoffs, right? Yep. Number two, the companies that adopt the right technology and the right process are going to be able to make money with these non-core acreage where other companies won't. And it's going to bring in young people. It's going to bring in entrepreneurs, startups, innovation. And I'm so excited for this. I feel like I've been waiting for this for 25 years. And I think it's just going to drive another level of business, especially on the upstream side of the house. But I think the same thing's going to happen with transport, with midstream as well. You're seeing a maturity of that market. There's a handful of big players. There's going to be some consolidation, which to your point will be big dollar deals because they're a handful of big players. But there's going to be spinoff even from the midstream part, whereas maybe we don't want these terminals anymore. Maybe our core asset is moving hydrocarbons from the Permian to Houston, right? And so I think that's going to be another wave of new mergers and acquisitions, new technology, new people, new process. So that part of it, I'm really excited about. I love my industry, and from the outside, sometimes we seem like we're old-fashioned, and we're not. We're risk-averse because of what we do, which causes us to be slow. And anytime something happens in the business that causes things to change a little bit quicker and to adopt new technology process, it's always fun. And so I can't wait to have this happen. And I want the audience to remember, I was talking about these mergers and acquisitions that have happened in the last couple of years, and that, the market's maturing. But you have to remember, in the 90s, Exxon and Mobil were two different companies, right? They merged. Chevron and Texaco, the same thing. So this isn't new to our industry. It's just a new wave of how it's happening. So I think y'all are 100% right on that. Now, here's one that I've been talking about for 2 years, and I've gotten into some Twitter battles over this.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, anybody can say anything on Twitter, right? It's not anything they ever say to my face. But refilling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve become a national priority. Adam, I hope to hell you're right about this. Let's talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, interesting. We were discussing a minute ago how our clients have focused on capital efficiency over just chasing to put barrels on the market, which is what we suffered through that time frame of effectively, obviously drilling for lease obligations, but also to effectively hit production targets. What supports our drill baby drill mindset, right? So reduction in cost, and how do we overcome the potential issues with Russian barrels coming on market, potential issues with Iran not being constrained in their ability to get barrels to market, is the SPR refill at the end of the day. And I think it's imperative for the safety of our country and the stability of that we have that in reserve, right? So we know why we released that during the Russian-Ukraine conflict, but it's an imperative for our country. I do also support, and from my perspective as a citizen of this country, utilizing our tax dollars to buy these barrels, I want them to be purchased at the right price. We should not be going into market and trying to buy this over $80 a barrel, nor should we be driving price up necessarily because we can be an incremental buyer right now, and be opportunistic. But I would call out that I think this administration is going to be savvy in the way they approach this, and I believe that we have a buyer of last resort if Russian barrels hit, if OPEC decides to play a market share position rather than a price position, because their policy of most recently has been to uphold or put a floor on the price, whereas in the past they have chased market share in barrels. And so I think we've got a defense for our industry in being able to refill the SPR. That's one of the upsides I would call from the drawdown that we had over the past few years, but I would also call it a national priority. And I think that the administration has already indicated that that's the same. So
yeah, and Adam, if the people don't know what the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is and what its function is, can you explain it real quick?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm not going to be too technical here, to be fair. So for those individuals, it's barrels in storage that are effectively owned by the government. Is that true, Mark?
That's 100% true.
Okay,
Right?
that's what I thought it
Yep.
was. Yeah, and you don't have to edit that one out. My point is, those are barrels owned by the U.S. that are in storage. They could be in tanks, could be in underground caverns, but it is oil in storage that we can deploy to assist in demand or supply shocks. If we go back to like the oil embargo in the 70s, is that true, Mark?
So that's part of it. So a lot of it's stored in salt caverns in the Gulf Coast, right? And what it's for is to be able to power our country and our military machine if something really bad happens, right? We burn 20 million barrels here a day. Last time I checked the SPR levels, we had about 13 days of a reserve. And the reason this is important is if something really bad happened between us and China, they're in the same boat. They can't provide the energy they need for their country and for the military machine. It has to be imported, even though they produce a lot of it themselves. And so it's vital that the U.S. can control the straits of China, because if we got into a war with them, if we can control the straits, we can rob them of energy. However, we don't have enough energy reserves for ourselves. So the SPR was originally set up to be able to power a military machine if something bad happened. And then later we figured out, because it was such a huge reserve, that we'd use it to affect pricing. And other countries have strategic petroleum reserves. China has one. Japan has one. And the problem was our last administration decided that they could use these barrels to influence what I think is public opinion. It really didn't make much of a difference at the pump, but the fact they were saying they were dumping these barrels on the market to lower price at the pump was hopefully to help them get some voters. But it put our country in a very economic and military weak place to be. And so this is why it's so important, if you're an American, to support this, is that this is literally our backup in case something really bad happens, and it's at historic lows. So, and you're right, though, it did start with the Arab oil embargo in, what is it, 72, 73. And so, and I do agree with you 100%. Our current administration is going to make this a priority, which finally makes me feel good. Because at one point, Adam, on oil and gas this week, last year, we were talking about, I think it was down to 7 days. Can you imagine if something bad happened in this country and we could only run this country for 7 days? I mean, it would be anarchy, right? And we need to get that back to what it's supposed to be, which is around 60 days worth of energy supply. But yeah, it is. I do 100% agree with you. It's become a national priority. Thank goodness. I was worried. I mean, seriously worried for a while. I was more worried about that than the aliens. So good thing is that this is coming back. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, aliens, go Google it. The next one, and this is so almost funny, because when y'all predicted this, nobody knew if you were right or wrong, and now it looks like you're 100% right. But the environment and emissions will continue to remain a priority, but the economic viability of carbon capture will take center stage. Let's talk about that.
That is interesting. And I think, if I remember right, you also had a prediction around carbon capture becoming more economically viable, right?
Yep.
And a huge potential boost to our industry because of the uses of carbon at the end of the day for secondary, tertiary recovery, as well as other uses. You might be able to add some more context to that. But the intent of putting this out there was that we knew when we made these projections that President Trump was going to be elected into office. And I also knew that there was going to be this whole idea that, hey, like the environment won't matter anymore. The reality is that emissions do matter to our industry, and it always has.
Yeah.
And this industry is well intended, and wants to operate in a clean way, right? So they're conservationists. They do care about emissions. We as an industry are doing our absolute best to innovate to ensure that we capture the most of this commodity absolutely possible. That is in the recovery rates from the reservoir, as well as in selling the natural gas as opposed to flaring it, and managing our closed loop drilling operations where there's less contamination to the environment. We've been leaders in the world in developing oil and gas assets and producing in the most clean way possible. That's why these barrels should be produced in the U.S. This is where I'm very aligned with the narrative of the current administration around our energy policy, that we should be producing the barrels we consume. And not only that, it would be better for the world if we exported more of this commodity, whether it's the oil or the natural gas molecule. it would be cleaner and better for the environment. So I very much believe in that. And of course, carbon capture is part of this, right? And so the super majors are moving that direction, as well as some non-super majors. For what that's worth is that there is benefit to taking that that carbon out, and then utilizing that as a resource in our operation. It's extremely valuable. And we cannot discount the fact that it has to make economic sense for it to be supported. And in this instance, it does very much. But again, I want to go back to this industry cares about emissions. That's what I'm finding with our clients. They may not make their entire business plan around all of it at every client, but at the end of the day, it does very much matter. And I believe that will continue to carry forward. But that was not widely understood. And I think maybe it still isn't widely understood.
It's not, and it's our own fault as an industry. My degree is in wildlife management. I am a educated and degreed environmentalist, and I love the oil and gas industry. And Adam, you're 100% right. We've always cared about the environment. We make mistakes. Stuff happens. Valdez, Bipu, Macondo, but we make a mistake. We clean it up. You're absolutely right that we produce the cleanest hydrocarbon molecule in the world. We also produce the cleanest refined products in the world. And if you care about the environment, absolutely, you want the U.S. to export and to produce. I ask this question to people all the time when we have these conversations and they don't know our industry. I ask them, said, raise your hand if you've ever heard of a Chinese or Russian oil spill. And of course, no hands go up. And that means one of two things. That means they're either better at it than us and the Europeans, or they don't tell. And I've seen it with my own eyes, Adam. They don't tell. They don't care. I was in Russia, and there was literally about a 20-acre spot that had almost 100 years of the oil spilled on the ground accidentally. They've never cleaned it up. It is a wasteland, and they're still producing there, right? So you're 100% right. Also, carbon capture and storage is a legitimate business. I have to tip my hat at Exxon and Oxy to figure out a way to get our tax dollars to pay for a product they used to have to buy. I mean, that's genius. That's business genius. But there's way more industrial uses for carbon dioxide than just enhanced oil recovery. So I love all this, and it's pushing us in the right way. And if you're old enough to remember, like me, back when we had acid rain in the 80s and a smog over LA, that's gone. We fixed that as an industry, right? The Clean Air Act was passed. The oil and gas industry worked with automobile manufacturers saying, how can we make cars burn cleaner? And now our cars burn so clean now, it almost doesn't even count. So we removed the sulfur, removed the lead. So this is just another step in us being stewards of the environment. And unfortunately, most of the world doesn't understand that we really do care. And that's our own fault as an industry. We do need to do a better job of educating the public on how it's not marketing spin. It's not greenwashing. We care. We work and live in the same planet as you do. Our kids go to school, right? Same place your kids go to school. And so if we can make a difference, we're going to frickin' do it. But I love this. Now, here's the one where we start talking a little bit before we turn the mic on, which I, of course, agree 100%. Sharp rise electrical demand to power AI data centers will rely heavily on natural gas. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so great call out. Again, you had a projection around this as well, so I appreciate your position on that. We know that electricity demand is going to go up substantially, and this ties back to energy security, going back to the whole SPR discussion. This also ties back to our competitive advantage in our country and our desire to onshore more manufacturing, right? So how does it, right? So if we're going to be stable as a country, we need to have an adequate supply of energy. Electricity is going to be the most in-demand form of power that we need. We know that that's going to be required for manufacturing to be onshore. It's going to be required for AI. We're effectively trading, as far as I've seen it, calories for kilowatt hours.
I love it. You're 100% right. Keep going.
Yeah, so we're trading calories for kilowatt hours, and we need stable electricity supply. And we cannot have this, we cannot be heavily exposed to intermittent supply. So that's why I believe, just like so many people in the industry, that natural gas is going to make up so much of this gap. Not to say that some of the renewables aren't going to be there, but the reality is you need a stable, non-intermittent supply. And so this is becoming a widely understood thing, and this whole behind the meter concept is starting to really develop. We're seeing clients start to invest in this space, whether it's a midstream or an upstream client. There's a lot of opportunity in our industry, and it needs to be supported as a country. At the end of the day, we need to have not only the supply, but the infrastructure to get it to the right location. And so I absolutely believe that this increase in demand is going to be covered by natural gas.
Yeah, it has to be. Like when you do the math and if you understand physics, we don't have very many options. And it's not a bad option. It's actually a fantastic option. And the rest of the world will follow suit as well. As we export gas in the form of LNG, as other countries switch from burning coal to generate electricity because their electrical demands will go up too, and they switch to burning natural gas, we lower emissions automatically without doing anything else just by switching fuel sources. So I give big shout out to Rex Tillerson with ExxonMobil, which must have been 20 years ago when he said LNG was the future. When he said it, I thought in my head he was crazy. Like nobody's gonna spend money to compress natural gas and move it around. And then they bought XTO, and I go, he's crazy. Well, he was right. I was wrong. They just saw it way ahead of time before I got to see it. And I 100% agree with you. I think natural gas is the fuel of the future. The other thing though is stuff like space travel. So SpaceX. You know what they run for fuel, Adam?
Methane.
Methane, natural gas,
Yep.
right? And so even space travel is dependent on natural gas, which is just a beautiful thing. All right, the last one, and I am going to quiz you a little bit about this to make sure I understand it. Regulatory process will become more efficient, not less stringent. What does that mean?
Yeah. So this ties back to the whole concept around emissions and the environment being a priority. So the idea that we're going to cut out regulatory processes and just say, hey, go drill. You don't have to check the normal standard boxes that you would have had to check in the past. I think to me is not true. I think at the end of the day, there are systems in place to protect the environment, to meet minimum standards, and to get a drilling permit in a particular area. I believe that at best, there will be a reduction in requirements, maybe, but it's not necessarily because we don't care about birds anymore, or it's not because we don't care about groundwater. It's because it's a more logical regulation that matches the intent, which is to protect groundwater, which is to manage around migration patterns in the Rockies. We can get into that, sage grouse or whatever that the bird is up there that affects your ability to get to move drilling rigs into federal lands. But my only point is that it's not necessarily going to become all that less stringent, but I believe there's going to be more transparency around what is required and more transparency and predictability in the process. And that is going to add a lot of value for our clients if they can plan ahead. And again, that might be a 6 or 7 page document goes down to 1 page, but they're getting rid of the redundancies. They're getting rid of the requirements that were not relevant and weren't really accomplishing what was necessary through that regulation. That's my belief. That's a prediction that has not proven to come true yet, but I believe it aligns with the intent of this administration. And it definitely aligns with some of the things that Chris Wright said last week.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. It's going to be interesting to see how the different states deal with it, right? So the federal government can do so much. And then you have another layer of regulatory that you have to deal with the state. Sometimes you have another layer, which is local municipality after that. And they don't talk to each other. That was, if you look at like the difference between applying for a drilling permit in Louisiana versus Wyoming, it's like two different universes, right? But they're doing the same job and operation. And if the federal government could give guidelines to the states, not enforcement, just guidelines on here's the best use of your resources, your limited resources, to make sure that we do this safely and environmentally friendly and standardize that, man, if we could just reduce the cycle time of getting a permit, that's going to drop the cost in this industry dramatically. A lot of people don't understand. They're just literally picking the operator. They have teams and teams of people, maybe contractors, whose job it is nothing to do but handhold these darn drilling permits through the state and the federal government. And sometimes it takes years to get approval. And if you need to change something as simple as, what your tiebacks could be, or maybe your laterals would be an extra 10 meter, sometimes you got to start the process all over again, which is not good for anybody. So I 100%, Adam, I really hope you're right about this. I think you are. And I do agree with you. I think our current administration's intent is to do this. Let's just see if they can untangle the massive web of inefficiencies that over the years have been allowed to grow in the permitting process.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think calling out the fact that the states have completely different processes from like the from the feds, because even in the case where we're drilling on federal lands, we've got a state permit and a federal permit. So very much aligned there. I do think that there are some states that maybe there won't be substantial change in their permitting process. I could not predict there being a substantial change in states starting with a C. Uh, I don't know. But I don't see it coming. But my hope is that the regulation is logical and it matches the overall intent not to stop. And I think the previous administration, I'm not trying to get political on your podcast here, Mark, but my issue there was that there were some games being played on the lease auctions and the permits. And there was this whole narrative around, hey, we're not holding up this industry or this business. And if it happened to be on federal lands, those permits could go from 30 days out to 18 months, in some cases 24 months, echoing what you just mentioned, where they wouldn't allow us to necessarily amend the permit. We would have to resubmit, restart the clock. I'm not saying that happened in every case. I just know that was a pretty consistent thing for many of our clients that were having issues. And so I believe that over time, there's going to be an overwhelming pressure for the regulation to match the intent and hopefully less games.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it will have to. And I had to laugh when you mentioned states with a C. I also had to laugh when you say you're trying not to get political. Adam, I try to not get into politics on Oil and Gas This Week for a decade.
Yeah.
And at some point, we just had to. It became too big a driver in the industry. And to act like it wasn't was not being justice to our audience. And I do get grief from California because I do make fun of them because they do things that are just past the point of common sense. However, I also had people from California reach out to me going, thank you for making fun of our state. Maybe people will recognize the potential that we have here, you know? So love you, California. I think you're the most beautiful state in the country. You could use some work on your energy policies and regulations over there, to put it mildly. So Adam, go ahead.
I have to add, Mark, I live in Colorado. So that was one of the other ones.
Yeah. So Colorado's interesting. We got actually, I guess 3 or 4 months ago, we actually recorded live from a prairie drilling site in Colorado. They're laying casing. And they're a new operator. They're a smaller operator, but they're doing things differently. And the state of Colorado permitting actually loves them because there's no storage. Everything's put in pipelines. It's all regulated. All the drilling's done with electrical. They haul in big battery packs. And so I think even in Colorado, if you figure out how to play to their rules, they're not hindering you. Now, whether their rules are the right rules or not, that's a different discussion. But like I said, I've watched an operating company in Colorado actually get the endorsement of the regulatory, which I didn't think I'd ever see that, right? Now, that's one compared to the other 927 other operators that are struggling, right? Anyway, this has been good. We need to get out of here. Adam, if people wanted to learn more about you, I'm guessing LinkedIn's the best place to go?
Yep, LinkedIn.
Yep. And if people wanted to learn more about Workrise, where should they go?
Yeah, so it's www.workrise.com, and that's WORKRISE.com.
Yep. And if you look in the first comment below, we'll have links to both Adam's LinkedIn profile and to Workrise. Go check them out. If you need some help with some of the stuff that we discussed today, if you want some input, reach out. Adam's happy to jump on a call, have a discussion. He is the least salesy person I've ever met in my entire life. He's not going to try to sell you anything. He's just going to try to see if he can help you, which is good. Adam, this has been great. Thank you for coming on this show. We do need to get out of here, so I appreciate your input on this, and I love what y'all are doing over there.
Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate the time.